The watch wasn't mine. I found it on my nightstand Tuesday morning, gleaming like a guilty conscience in the pale light filtering through our bedroom curtains. A Rolex Submariner, the kind that costs more than my monthly salary as a structural engineer. The kind Martin Kessler wore to every company event, flashing it around like a badge of superiority. My name's Adrian Falk, and I've spent the last 15 years building things that don't fall down. Bridges, office complexes, shopping centers. I understand stress points, load-bearing walls, and how structures fail when the foundation shifts. What I didn't understand was how my marriage had been crumbling right under my nose. "Whose watch is this, Janelle?" I called out, holding the expensive timepiece between my thumb and forefinger like it might bite me. My wife's voice drifted from the bathroom, casual as Sunday morning coffee. "Oh, that's Martin's. He left it here yesterday when he dropped off those event planning documents. You know how scattered he gets." Scattered. Right. Martin Kessler, Vice President of Corporate Development, worth about $3 million, just casually forgets a $20,000 watch on my nightstand. The same Martin who'd been Janelle's boss for the past 2 years, ever since she started working at Meridian Events. I set the watch down carefully, my engineer's mind already calculating angles and stress points. The story didn't add up. Martin had never been to our house. Janelle always met clients at the office or neutral locations. She'd made a point of telling me that, actually, going on about professional boundaries and company policy. "I'll drop it off at his office," I said, testing the waters. "No need!" Janelle's response came too quick, too sharp. "I'll take it to him today. He's probably frantic looking for it." I stared at my reflection in the watch face, seeing my own brown eyes staring back with growing suspicion. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never heard that particular tone in Janelle's voice before. It was the sound of someone trying too hard to sound casual. The bathroom door opened, and Janelle emerged in her silk robe, blonde hair perfectly tousled in that way that takes 20 minutes to achieve. At 39, she still turned heads, still had that magnetic presence that had drawn me to her at a college party 2 decades ago. But something was different now. The way she avoided my eyes, the way her fingers fidgeted with her wedding ring. "Coffee's ready," she said, brushing past me toward the dresser. "Don't you have that Henderson project meeting this morning?" She was right, of course. The Henderson office complex had been my baby for 8 months, and today's meeting would determine whether we moved forward or scrapped the whole thing. But suddenly, work felt less important than the expensive watch glinting on my nightstand. "Yeah, at 10. I picked up the Rolex again, turning it over in my hands. Funny thing about this watch, the inscription on the back. Janelle froze, her hand halfway to her jewelry box. Inscription? "To Martin, all my love, Lisa." That's his wife, right? Sweet that she'd give him something so expensive. Makes you wonder why he'd be so careless with it. The color drained from Janelle's face, but she recovered quickly. Too quickly. People are careless with expensive things all the time. That's why they have insurance. I nodded slowly, filing away her reaction in the growing folder of inconsistencies my mind was building. "I suppose you're right. Still, I think I'll call Lisa Kessler directly. Make sure she knows her husband's been leaving valuable gifts lying around strange bedrooms." "Adrian, don't." Janelle turned to face me fully, and for a moment her mask slipped completely. I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach clench. Panic. Guilt. And underneath it all, a cold calculation that I'd never seen before. "Just let me handle it, okay? Martin's going through a rough patch with Lisa. The last thing he needs is you stirring up trouble." "Trouble?" I set the watch down with deliberate care. What kind of trouble would I be stirring up exactly? She was already moving toward the closet, pulling out clothes with sharp, jerky movements. "You know what I mean. Marriage stuff. It's complicated. Most things are, when you're sleeping with someone else's husband." The words hung in the air between us like a bridge cable that had just snapped. Janelle went perfectly still, a black dress clutched in her hands. For 10 seconds, maybe 15, neither of us moved. Then she laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. "That's ridiculous, Adrian. Martin's my boss. We have a professional relationship." Professional relationships don't usually involve leaving jewelry in bedrooms. "You're being paranoid." She turned back to the closet, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands shook slightly as she rifled through hangers. "Maybe you should talk to someone about these trust issues." Trust issues. That was rich, coming from the woman who'd been lying to my face for God knows how long. But I didn't push it. Not yet. I had an engineering problem now, and engineers solve problems methodically, with evidence and careful analysis. "You're probably right," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "I'll see you tonight. Try not to let Martin forget any more expensive accessories." I left the watch on the nightstand and headed for the shower. Behind me, I heard Janelle's sharp intake of breath, followed by the sound of her cell phone dialing. She thought I couldn't hear her whispered conversation over the running water, but our bathroom acoustics had always been terrible. "It's me," she said. "We have a problem." The water was scalding against my skin, but not as hot as the anger building in my chest. 15 years. 15 years of marriage, of building a life together, of believing in something that was apparently as structurally unsound as a house built on sand. But anger was just another force to be calculated, channeled, and used constructively. And if there's one thing I'd learned in my profession, it's that when you discover a critical structural failure, you don't just patch it up and hope for the best. Sometimes, you have to tear the whole thing down and start over. The Henderson meeting went exactly as badly as I'd expected. Hard to focus on load-bearing calculations when your marriage is collapsing like a poorly designed high-rise. My business partner, Aiden Torres, noticed my distraction immediately. "You look like someone ran over your dog with a cement mixer," he said as we walked back to our office. "What's eating you?" Aiden and I had been friends since college, business partners for 8 years. If anyone would understand the engineering approach to personal catastrophe, it would be him. But I wasn't ready to share my suspicions yet, not until I had more data. "Just tired," I said. "Janelle's been working late a lot. Event planning season, you know?" "Right." Aiden gave me a look that said he wasn't buying it, but he didn't push. That's what I liked about him. He understood when to apply pressure and when to let things settle. Back at the office, I tried to focus on structural drawings and stress analyses, but my mind kept drifting to Martin Kessler's watch. The inscription, Janelle's panicked reaction, the whispered phone call. By 3 o'clock, I'd made a decision that would have horrified my younger, more trusting self. I was going to investigate my own wife. It started small. I checked our credit card statements online, looking for unusual charges. Hotel rooms, expensive restaurants, the kind of places Janelle claimed she never went to for work events. What I found made me freeze. The Grandview Hotel, downtown. 3 separate charges over the past month, always on days when Janelle claimed to be working late on the Morrison wedding. Each charge for a room, not just dinner or drinks. Each charge split between our joint account and another card I didn't recognize. I printed the statements, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. Then I did something that 15 years ago would have seemed unthinkable. I installed a tracking app on Janelle's phone. It was easier than it should have been. She'd never changed her passcode from our anniversary date, and the app was designed to be invisible. Within minutes, I had access to her location history, her text messages, her call logs. The picture that emerged was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Text messages to Martin that had nothing to do with event planning. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Tell Lisa you're working late again. Room 412, same as always." Location data showing her at the Grandview Hotel every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months, always between 6 and 9 p.m. Always on days she told me she was meeting with vendors or scouting venues. Call logs showing hour-long conversations with Martin, sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning. Conversations that happened while I was in the shower or walking the dog or buried in project specifications. By the time Janelle came home that evening, I had enough evidence to destroy her in any divorce court in the country. But I wasn't thinking about divorce yet. I was thinking about revenge. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing my cheek like she had every evening for 15 years, like she hadn't spent the afternoon in a hotel room with her boss. "Productive," I said. "Very productive. How about yours? Any interesting meetings?" "Just the usual. Vendor calls, budget reviews. You know how it is." I nodded, watching her face for tells. The slight tightness around her eyes when she lied. The way her left hand fidgeted with her earring. 15 years of marriage had taught me to read her expressions, but apparently I'd been reading the wrong book. "Martin's watch," I said casually. "Did you get it back to him?" "Of course." She turned toward the kitchen, but not before I caught the flash of relief in her eyes. He was so grateful. Apparently Lisa would have ruined him if he'd lost it. I bet she would have. We ate dinner like a normal couple, talked about our days like a normal couple, watched Netflix like a normal couple. And all the while, I was planning her destruction with the methodical precision I usually reserved for calculating concrete stress tolerances. That night, while Janelle slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and thinking about structural failures, how they usually start small, a hairline crack in the foundation, a bolt that's slightly loose, a support beam that's carrying just a little more weight than it was designed for. You don't notice the damage at first. The building looks solid, functions normally, passes all its inspections, but underneath, the failure is spreading, weakening the entire structure until one day, without warning, the whole thing comes crashing down. My marriage had been failing for months, maybe years. I just hadn't been looking for the cracks. But now, I was looking. And what I was seeing made me realize that Janelle wasn't the only one who'd been keeping secrets. I'd been hiding something too, something I'd never admitted even to myself. I didn't just want to catch her, I wanted to destroy her. Completely, publicly, and with the kind of methodical thoroughness that would leave her social and professional life in ruins. The watch had been a mistake. Her first real mistake in what was probably a very careful campaign of deception. And like any good engineer, I was going to use that mistake to bring down the entire structure she'd built around her lies. Starting tomorrow, Janelle Falk was going to learn what happened when you tried to fool someone who understood exactly how things break. The next morning, I started building my case like I was designing a skyscraper. Foundation first, then the framework, then the details that would make the whole structure unshakable. I began with Martin Kessler himself. A little internet research revealed more than I'd expected. He lived in Oakwood Heights, the expensive suburb where all the corporate executives played house. Married to Lisa for 12 years, 2 kids, both in private school. Member of the country club, drove a black BMW, played squash every Wednesday at the athletic club downtown. More importantly, he had a reputation to protect. Meridian Events was a family-owned company, founded by Lisa's father. Martin wasn't just an employee, he was family. An affair with a subordinate wouldn't just cost him his job, it would cost him everything. I spent my lunch break parked outside the Grandview Hotel, watching the entrance. Sure enough, at 6:15 p.m., Martin's BMW pulled into the parking garage. At 6:23, Janelle's silver Accord followed. They were creatures of habit, which made them predictable, and predictable meant vulnerable. I waited until 6:45, then walked into the hotel lobby like I owned the place. The desk clerk was young, probably a college student working part-time. Perfect. "Excuse me," I said, flashing my most charming smile. "I'm supposed to meet my business partner in room 412, but I think I might have the wrong date. Could you tell me if the room is currently occupied?" The kid checked his computer. "Yes, sir. Room 412 is occupied. Checked in about 30 minutes ago. Great, thanks. I'll just head up. Sir, I'll need to call up and announce you. That's okay, I said, already walking toward the elevators. It's a surprise. I didn't go to the 4th floor. Instead, I positioned myself in the lobby where I could see the elevators and waited. At 8:47, Martin stepped out first, straightening his tie and checking his phone. 3 minutes later, Janelle emerged, her hair slightly mussed, despite obvious efforts to fix it. They didn't leave together. Too smart for that. But they weren't smart enough to vary their routine, and routine was something I could work with. The next day was Wednesday, Martin's squash day. The Riverside Athletic Club was exactly the kind of place I'd expected. All polished wood and brass fixtures, with the kind of casual luxury that screamed old money. I'd never been inside before, but I dressed the part. Khakis, polo shirt, deck shoes. Just another middle-class professional trying to network his way up the social ladder. I found Martin on court 3, playing against a man I recognized from the society pages as a city councilman. They were both good players, but Martin was better. Aggressive, competitive, the kind of man who probably applied the same ruthless focus to seducing other men's wives. I waited until they finished their game, then approached the councilman as he was leaving. Great match, I said. I've been looking for a regular playing partner. Is Martin available for games, or does he have a full schedule? Martin's pretty booked, the councilman replied. Plays here every Wednesday, sometimes Fridays if his work schedule allows. You might catch him in the locker room if you want to ask directly. Perfect. I found Martin toweling off near his locker, still flushed from the game. Up close, he was smaller than I'd expected. Maybe 5'10", with the soft edges that come from too many business lunches. Handsome in a generic corporate way, but nothing special. Nothing worth destroying a marriage over. Martin Kessler? I extended my hand. Adrian Falk. I think you know my wife, Janelle. His face went through several interesting changes. Surprise, recognition, calculation, and finally a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Adrian, of course. Janelle talks about you all the time. Great to finally meet you. Likewise. I kept my grip firm, just shy of painful. Janelle mentioned you left something at our house the other day. A watch? Right, yes. So clumsy of me. Janelle was kind enough to return it. No problem at all. Though I have to admit, I was curious about what brought you to our bedroom in the first place. The color drained from his face. Around us, other men continued their conversations, oblivious to the fact that Martin Kessler was currently experiencing what engineers call catastrophic structural failure. We were just... He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. Business documents, event planning stuff, very boring. I'm sure it was. I smiled, the kind of smile I usually reserved for contractors who tried to cut corners on safety specs. Well, I won't keep you. But Martin, next time you need to discuss business with my wife, maybe stick to the office. Bedrooms can give people the wrong impression. I left him standing there, probably wondering how much I knew and what I planned to do about it. The answer was everything and plenty, but I wanted him to sweat for a while first. Fear makes people stupid, and stupid people make mistakes. That evening, I was waiting in the kitchen when Janelle came home, 45 minutes later than usual. Sorry I'm late, she said, avoiding my eyes as she set down her purse. Traffic was terrible. No worries, I had an interesting day myself. Met your boss at the athletic club. She went very still. Martin, what were you doing at his club? Thinking about joining. He seemed surprised to meet me, almost like he'd forgotten I existed. That's weird. I talk about you all the time at work. That's what he said. I opened the refrigerator, taking my time selecting a beer. Funny thing, though. When I mentioned the watch incident, he got very nervous, started stammering about business documents and boring meetings. You'd think a vice president would be more articulate. Janelle's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I caught the flash of panic in her eyes. "I should take this," she said. "Work call. At 9 p.m.? Event planning never sleeps." She disappeared into the living room, but I could hear her hushed, urgent conversation. Damage control, crisis management, all the skills that made her good at her job, now being applied to covering up her affair. But she was thinking like an event planner, not an engineer. She was focused on managing the immediate crisis, not the structural integrity of her entire deception, and that was going to be her downfall. By Thursday, Martin was unraveling like a cheap sweater. I knew this because I'd started following him, learning his patterns, identifying his pressure points. The man was a creature of absolute routine, which made him easy to predict and easier to manipulate. Coffee at Starbucks every morning at 7:15, same order every time. Lunch at Romano's on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always with business associates. Gym after work on Mondays and Fridays, and every Wednesday, squash at the club followed by drinks with the same group of corporate climbers. But now his routine was showing cracks. He kept checking his phone, looking over his shoulder, jumping at unexpected sounds. Paranoia was setting in, and paranoid people make increasingly desperate choices. I decided to accelerate the process. Friday afternoon, I called Meridian Events and asked to speak with Martin about a potential corporate event. His secretary put me through immediately. Martin Kessler speaking. "Martin, this is Adrian Falk. We met at the athletic club." Silence. Then, "What do you want?" "To discuss business. I'm planning a corporate event for my engineering firm, and Janelle suggested I speak with you directly. She said you two work very closely together." I'm very busy right now." "I'm sure you are. But this is important. Maybe we could meet somewhere private? Somewhere we could talk openly about your working relationship with my wife?" Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was strained. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, Martin. I'm stating facts. You've been sleeping with my wife for at least 3 months. You meet at the Grandview Hotel every Tuesday and Thursday. Room 412 is apparently your favorite, and you're stupid enough to leave expensive jewelry in other men's bedrooms. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. Credit card receipts, phone records, location data, hotel security footage. I've been very thorough. The question is, what are we going to do about it? What do you want?" There it was, the question I'd been waiting for. The moment when Martin Kessler realized he wasn't dealing with a cuckolded husband looking for a payout. He was dealing with someone who understood exactly how to dismantle a life with surgical precision. "Nothing you can give me," I said, "but I thought you should know that I'll be having lunch with your wife Lisa tomorrow, at Romano's, 1 o'clock, the same restaurant where you and Janelle meet every Tuesday. You can't. I can and I will. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to tell her yourself. I hear confession is good for the soul." I hung up before he could respond. That evening, Janelle was a wreck. She'd obviously talked to Martin, probably spent the afternoon trying to figure out how much damage I could do and how quickly I might do it. She kept starting conversations and then trailing off, watching my face for signs of what I was thinking. "Adrian," she said finally, as we sat on the couch pretending to watch television. "If something was wrong between us, you'd talk to me about it, right? We'd work it out?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. But now I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the careful way she chose her words, the performance she'd been giving me for God knows how long. "Of course," I said, "communication is the foundation of any good relationship." She relaxed slightly. "Good, because I love you, Adrian. Whatever else happens, I want you to know that." "I love you too," I replied, and meant it. That was the hell of it. Even knowing what she'd done, even planning what I was going to do to her, part of me still loved the woman she used to be. Or maybe the woman I'd thought she was. But love and justice were different things, and justice was what I was after now. Saturday morning, I dressed carefully for my lunch with Lisa Kessler. Conservative suit, understated tie, the kind of outfit that said trustworthy professional rather than vengeful husband. I wanted her to take me seriously, to see me as an ally rather than a threat. Romano's was busy for a Saturday afternoon, filled with the kind of well-dressed suburbanites who treated lunch as a social event. I'd made a reservation under my own name, specifically requesting the corner table where Martin usually sat with his business associates, and his wife's subordinate. Lisa arrived exactly on time, which told me something about her character. She was an attractive woman in her early 40s, with the kind of understated elegance that comes from old money and good breeding. She looked like someone who'd never had to question her place in the world, never had to wonder if the people closest to her were lying to her face. That was about to change. "Mrs. Kessler, Adrian Falk, thank you for meeting me." She shook my hand with a firm grip, her eyes curious but wary. "Your call was very mysterious, Mr. Falk. Something about my husband and a business matter that required discretion? Please, call me Adrian. And yes, it's about your husband and my wife, and the fact that they've been having an affair for the past 3 months." I said it quietly, matter-of-factly, the way I might discuss load calculations or building permits. But the effect on Lisa was immediate and devastating. The color drained from her face, and for a moment I thought she might faint. That's impossible. Martin would never. "I have proof," I said gently. "Hotel receipts, phone records, photographs. I'm very sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I thought you deserved to know." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, processing the information, connecting dots she'd probably been unconsciously avoiding for months. "The late meetings," she said finally, "the business trips that never seemed to involve actual travel. The new cologne. Her name is Janelle Falk. She works for your husband at Meridian Events. They meet every Tuesday and Thursday at the Grandview Hotel, room 412. They've been very careful, but not careful enough." Lisa's hands were shaking as she reached for her water glass. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" "Justice," I said simply, "for both of us." Lisa Kessler turned out to be everything I'd hoped for in an ally: intelligent, ruthless, and absolutely furious at being made a fool of. She also had something I lacked: access to Martin's professional life and the power to destroy it completely. "Meridian Events is my family's company," she explained, as we sat in her BMW outside Romano's, going through the evidence I'd compiled. "My father founded it, my brother runs it now, and Martin works there because I vouched for him 12 years ago. If this gets out—" "It's going to get out," I said. "The question is how we control the narrative." She studied the hotel receipts, the phone records, the photographs I'd taken of them entering and leaving the Grandview. Her face was marble cold, but I could see the fury burning behind her eyes. "Tuesday is the monthly board meeting," she said finally. "All the senior staff will be there, including the family members who actually own the company. If certain information were to come to light during that meeting, Martin would be finished. Completely, and so would your wife." It was exactly what I'd been hoping for: public humiliation, professional destruction, and the kind of social ostracism that would follow them both for years. But I wanted more than that. I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd lost and why they'd lost it. "There's something else," I said. "Something that will make this even more satisfying." I told her about my plan for Monday night, the final confrontation, the moment when Martin and Janelle would realize that their carefully constructed affair had been nothing more than a house of cards, and I'd been the one holding the match. Lisa smiled for the first time since we'd met. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "I like the way you think, Adrian. Martin always said engineers were boring. I think he's about to learn how wrong he was." Sunday passed in a surreal haze of normalcy. Janelle and I went through our usual weekend routine: grocery shopping, laundry, dinner with friends. She was trying too hard to act normal, laughing too loudly at jokes, touching my arm too often, overcompensating for the guilt she thought she was hiding. I played along, giving her the performance she expected. The oblivious husband, trusting and slightly dull, the kind of man who'd never suspect his wife of betrayal. It was easier than I'd expected. After 15 years of marriage, we both knew our roles perfectly. But underneath the domestic theater, I was making final preparations, transferring money from our joint accounts into my personal account, changing passwords on shared credit cards, securing important documents. An engineer's approach to divorce: methodical, thorough, and designed to leave the other party with as few resources as possible. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Aiden was suspicious. I never called in sick, but I told him I was dealing with a personal matter and would explain everything later. Instead, I spent the day at a lawyer's office, filing for divorce and ensuring that Janelle would be served with papers at the most public, humiliating moment possible. Then I went home and waited. Janelle came home at her usual time, 6:30 p.m., looking nervous but trying to hide it. She'd probably spent the day wondering if this was the day her world would collapse, not knowing that I'd already lit the fuse. "How was your day?" she asked, the same question she'd asked every evening for 15 years. "Productive," I replied. "Very productive. How about yours? Any interesting meetings with Martin?" She flinched at his name. "Just the usual work stuff, nothing special." "That's good, because after tomorrow you won't be having any more meetings with Martin. Ever." She went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean that tomorrow is Tuesday, Janelle. Board meeting day at Meridian Events, the day when Lisa Kessler presents certain evidence to the company leadership, the day when Martin's career ends and yours goes down with it." "You talked to Lisa?" "We had a very productive conversation. She's quite upset about your relationship with her husband. Apparently she doesn't appreciate employees who sleep their way up the corporate ladder." "Adrian, please what? Please pretend I don't know about the hotel rooms? Please ignore the credit card receipts and the phone records and the fact that you've been lying to my face for months?" She started crying then, the kind of desperate tears that come when someone realizes their world is ending and there's nothing they can do to stop it. "It didn't mean anything," she sobbed. It was just physical. I love you, Adrian. I've always loved you." "No," I said quietly. "You love the idea of me. The stable husband, the reliable income, the comfortable life I provided while you played house with someone else's husband. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you asked about my work, Janelle? When's the last time you showed any interest in my life that didn't directly affect yours? When's the last time you looked at me and saw something other than a convenient placeholder?" She couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. Our marriage had been over long before Martin Kessler came along. He was just the symptom, not the disease, but symptoms still needed to be treated. "Pack a bag," I said. "You can stay at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow, after the board meeting, you'll probably want to start looking for a new job and a new place to live. You can't just throw me out. Actually, I can. I've already filed for divorce, frozen our joint accounts, and changed the locks. Your belongings will be packed and waiting on the porch by Thursday. You can pick them up any time after noon." She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. And maybe she hadn't. Maybe the man she'd married, trusting, accommodating, willing to overlook small betrayals for the sake of peace. Maybe that man had gone the moment I found Martin's watch on my nightstand. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm the man you underestimated," I said. "I'm the man who spent 15 years building something beautiful with you, only to discover you'd been tearing it down behind my back. I'm the man who's going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are." She left that night, taking only what she could carry. I watched from the window as she loaded her car, her movements jerky with panic and rage. She kept looking back at the house, probably hoping I'd change my mind, call her back, give her a chance to explain or apologize or negotiate her way out of the consequences. But I'd moved past forgiveness. I was in demolition mode now, and demolition was something I understood perfectly. Tuesday morning, I dressed in my best suit and drove to the Meridian Events office building. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I just sat in my car in the parking lot and waited for the show to begin. At 10:47 a.m., Martin Kessler burst through the front doors of the building, his face red with rage and humiliation. He was carrying a cardboard box, the universal symbol of professional disgrace, and walking like a man who'd just been stripped of everything that mattered to him. Lisa had been thorough and creative. At 11:23 a.m., Janelle emerged, also carrying a box, also walking with the particular shame of someone who'd been publicly exposed and found wanting. She saw Martin loading his car and approached him, probably hoping for mutual comfort or a plan for salvaging their relationship. Instead, Martin turned on her with the fury of a man who'd lost everything and needed someone to blame. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the gestures, the finger-pointing, the way Janelle stepped back as if he'd slapped her. Their affair was over. Their careers were over. Their reputations were over. But I wasn't finished yet. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in systematic destruction. I approached the dismantling of their lives with the same methodical precision I'd used to demolish a condemned building, carefully, thoroughly, and with maximum impact. Martin, it turned out, was even more vulnerable than I'd anticipated. The affair wasn't just a violation of company policy. It was a betrayal of family trust that cut to the core of everything he'd built his life around. Lisa's father, the company founder, was particularly unforgiving. Within days, word had spread through their entire social circle. Country club membership revoked, invitations withdrawn, children quietly disinvited from birthday parties and social events. Janelle's fall was equally spectacular. The event planning industry in our city was small and gossipy, and news of her affair with a married boss traveled fast. No one wanted to hire someone with that kind of reputation, especially for weddings and family celebrations. Her professional network evaporated overnight. But the real masterpiece was what happened to their relationship. I'd predicted it, of course. Affairs thrive on secrecy, on the thrill of forbidden meetings and stolen moments. Strip away the mystery and the danger, expose the participants to public scrutiny and professional consequences, and what's left is usually just two people who realize they don't actually like each other very much. Martin and Janelle lasted exactly 12 days after their joint firing. I know this because Aiden, who'd finally gotten the full story out of me over several beers, had been tracking their social media with the dedication of a forensic accountant. She's posting passive-aggressive quotes about trust and loyalty, he reported during one of our evening updates. He's posting gym selfies and motivational quotes about overcoming adversity. Neither one is mentioning the other. Give it time, I said. Stress reveals character, and neither one of them has much character to reveal. I was right. The breakup, when it came, was as public and messy as their affair had been secret and careful. Shouting match in the parking lot of a Whole Foods, witnessed by at least a dozen people with smartphones. Accusations of manipulation and betrayal. Rich, coming from two people who'd built their relationship on manipulating and betraying others. The videos went viral in our local social media circles. Whole Foods breakup became a minor internet sensation, complete with commentary and memes. I watched it all with the satisfaction of an engineer whose calculations had proven exactly correct. But I still wasn't finished. The final phase of my plan required patience and perfect timing. I waited until Martin had moved out of his family home. Lisa had kept the house naturally and was living in a cramped apartment across town. Until Janelle had burned through her savings and was working part-time at a retail job, her event planning career effectively over. Until they were both at their lowest point, isolated and desperate, and wondering how their lives had gone so spectacularly wrong. Then, I made my final move. I sent each of them an identical text message. Meet me at Romano's tonight, 8 p.m., corner table. Time to finish this. They both came, probably hoping for closure or forgiveness, or some kind of explanation that would help them make sense of their destruction. What they got instead was a masterclass in consequences. I arrived first and chose a table with a clear view of the entrance. Martin walked in at exactly 8 p.m., looking around nervously until he spotted me. He'd lost weight, probably from stress, and his expensive suit had been replaced by off-the-rack clothes that didn't quite fit. Janelle arrived 3 minutes later, saw Martin, and almost turned around and left. But curiosity won out over self-preservation. It usually does. They sat down across from me like defendants awaiting sentencing. "Thank you both for coming," I said, signaling the waiter for a bottle of wine. I thought it was time we had an honest conversation about what happened and why. "What's there to talk about?" Martin's voice was bitter. "You destroyed our lives. Congratulations." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. "I simply revealed what was already there. The lies, the betrayal, the complete lack of respect for the people who trusted you. All I did was turn on the lights." "You turned Lisa against me," he continued. "Poisoned her against me with your evidence and your accusations." I told her the truth. What she did with that information was her choice. Janelle had been silent, but now she spoke up. "Why, Adrian? Why go to such lengths? We could have worked this out privately, gotten divorced quietly. You didn't have to ruin us." "Didn't I?" I poured 3 glasses of wine, though I doubted either of them would drink. "Let me tell you what would have happened if I'd handled this quietly. You would have spun some story about growing apart, irreconcilable differences, mutual decision to separate. Martin would have found a way to keep his job, maybe even get a promotion out of the sympathy factor. You would have gotten half of everything I'd worked for, plus alimony, plus a fresh start with your reputation intact. And that would have been wrong because it would have been a lie, because it would have rewarded your betrayal and punished my loyalty, because it would have allowed you both to continue believing that actions don't have consequences, that you can hurt people without paying a price." The waiter brought our wine. None of us touched it. "So this was all about revenge," Martin said. "No," I corrected. "This was about justice. Revenge is emotional, impulsive, disproportionate. Justice is calculated, measured, and perfectly proportional to the offense." "You call this proportional?" Janelle gestured at herself, at Martin, at the wreckage of their lives. "We made a mistake, Adrian. People make mistakes. Mistakes are accidental, singular. What you did was a campaign of deliberate deception that lasted for months. You didn't make a mistake, Janelle. You made a choice, dozens of choices. Every lie you told, every hotel room you booked, every time you looked me in the eye and pretended to be faithful, those were all choices. And now you've made your choice," Martin said, "to destroy us both." "No," I said, standing up and leaving money on the table for the wine we hadn't touched. "I made the choice to stop protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. What happened after that was entirely up to you." I walked toward the exit, then paused and turned back. "You want to know the really funny part?" I said. "I probably would have forgiven you, Janelle. If you'd come to me honestly, admitted what you'd done, asked for a chance to rebuild what we'd lost, I probably would have tried. Because I loved you enough to work past betrayal." Her eyes filled with tears. "And now?" "Now I love myself enough not to." I left them sitting there, 2 people who'd gambled everything on a relationship built on lies and lost spectacularly. I drove home to the house that was now truly mine, poured myself a real drink, and sat on the porch watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from Aiden. "How did it go?" "It's finished," I texted back. And it was. Not just the marriage, not just the affair, but the entire chapter of my life that had included Janelle Falk. I'd closed that book with surgical precision, leaving no loose ends, no unfinished business, no lingering questions about who was responsible for what. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that Martin had moved to another state, taken a job with a small firm at half his previous salary. Janelle was working at a department store and living with her sister, her dreams of event planning glory effectively over. I felt no satisfaction in their continued misery, no ongoing